Ladies and gentlemen, this is your final boarding call for the good ship SS Tomorrow.
Today on The Friendly Futurist, what is the Metaverse from a Fintech point of view? And welcome back. And today we've got a very special guest all the way from the Emerald Isle, aka Ireland. We've got Darren Lee, and I do believe Darren is an avid listener of this show. So this is the first for many fans out there in the wide world. Now, Darren is also a fellow podcaster. He's the host and founder of Kickoff Sessions podcast over there in Dublin, and he's well versed in fintech. And we're having a very big discussion about the implications of Metaverse for fintech or financial technology. Now, there is a terminology that will be passed around a lot on this episode. That is DeFi. So I've got this little segment coming up now to explain to you what we mean by when we say DeFi. Right, and this is the first of my new segments I'm going to promise you this week, and it's all about the jargonify. So once you go into cutting-edge technology, you'll come across a lot of industry jargon, but not necessarily mean so much for the average guy on the street. And this is our first segment because coming up in today's episode, we're going to discuss this in detail, and that is the term DeFi, or decentralized finance. Now, I've got in the studio right now my editor, Alvin, who's in the Philippines. Say hi, Alvin.
Hi, everyone.
Now, let's put it into a hypothetical situation. I'm in Australia, Alvin's in the Philippines. Now, for me to pay Alvin for his services, I would have to go hypothetically, for an app like PayPal. So what that means in a centralized finance system, I'll have to use my bank account, go for PayPal. PayPal pays Alvin's bank account, then that converts my Aussie dollars into Philippine pesos. That's how we get paid. But you see, there's a lot of middlemen. Now, in a decentralized finance, I cut out my bank and PayPal. So I just pay Alvin in crypto, and it's a win-win situation. And this is what DeFi is all about. This is a threat to the banking system. But let's face it, the banks aren't that friendly, and the banks are being bastards. And we had a Royal Commission here in Australia 2 years ago about the banking sector, and they all in the finance sector. And this is really exciting stuff because this means we can have a decentralized global village where we can pay one another without relying on banks. And if the banking system collapses, then our money's still protected. So that is DeFi in under 2 minutes. Well, there you have it. Now, on with today's show. Darren Lee is coming up after the break. And welcome back. And today we've got a special guest with Darren Lee. And Darren, welcome to the show. And first and foremost, can you just give us a rundown on yourself and about your podcast?
I will indeed. So first, Dave, thanks so much for the invite. So my name is Darren Lee. Basically, I'm host of Kickoff Sessions. We do a careers podcast for young professionals, focusing on a lot of tech and a lot of professional careers. The other aspect of my existence as well is my background in Fintech. So I'm working with a startup at the moment that's based in the UK, all around in the space of, payments, wealth and trading, all this kind of area. And my own show for the last year has had a lot of focus on this around tech. So I've been as interested as you are at the moment in the latest things that are coming down the road around Metaverse and all different aspects. So That's where a lot of my energy is put into these days, I guess.
Yeah. I think, ever since Zuck announced the Metaverse, I think it's just the attention has been focused straight onto it. But, was aware of the Metaverse about this time last year. So it's just interesting how it's just kind of jumped that chasm.
Yeah, and in what way? What capacity was it?
I kind of knew what's happening in the gaming community and hasn't quite reached to the mainstream, but now I think it's on top of the mind for a lot of people, and people know what it is. This time last year, I probably would have a hard time explaining what the Metaverse is to people.
Exactly. And now with that as well, you've seen all the hype, all like the price changes, all the interest, and like we'll get into a lot of details, but that's where all the big interest comes from. And there's a lot of talking points we'll get into, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course, Darren, you're in fintech and we're talking blockchain today. And obviously, the first thing my listeners want to know about is the world of DeFi. So can you explain DeFi to the average person on the street?
Of course. So this is a big, obviously, development that's got a lot of mainstream attention, like we've just really alluded to. But in a nutshell, in a very basic way, it's a decentralized approach to looking at the traditional financial instruments and a traditional financial model. So before you would have a lot of brokers, a lot of exchanges, a lot of intermediaries, and with a lot of different kind of blockchain technologies, usually built on smart contracts through Ethereum, a lot of the middleman areas have been now removed, which is great because it gives from a theoretical perspective, it gives the opportunity to remove the middleman. And we've seen examples in this at the moment with insurance, asset management, we've seen it with credit as well, and peer-to-peer lending. So traditionally, we would have had these huge fees, really people putting their hands in your kind of pocket essentially. But now we have the opportunity to build scalable processes on this new kind of infrastructure platform. Now it's still in the infant stage of it, I do believe, but it gives a whole new opportunity to really what can come down the road as you continue to scale up this technology.
And how would DeFi replace or revolutionise the banking and finance industries? Are we going to see the disappearance of the high street banks, for example?
I think it's going to be a complementary kind of like parallel between the two, because the reason why there's multiple different factors. So if you're looking at traditional finance, obviously there's the cracks. If you look at your top tech companies, there's also cracks in them too. And to say going fully decentralized does not necessarily mean it's going to override that traditional approach, because they come out with a lot of capital, they have a customer base, especially in the area of asset management. You have people that want their money managed by the big likes of investment firms, whether it's Goldman, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley. So they always kind of have their imprint. Now, where I do see their opportunity, I do feel is in the ratios of how much of finance is going to be dominated by a centralized versus decentralized approach. And I think really, as I said at the beginning, like we have a new opportunity to make these different changes. So it may not make sense for someone who's managing 200K to go in a decentralized approach because they want someone to manage their finances on an ongoing basis. But what about someone like me or you who doesn't want to use the fees in between?
Yeah.
We could definitely see a proportion of people move into that space. And I think it's a real kind of cultural change. And that's what's really interesting about like crypto markets, is because like people that are in there get really fascinated by this concept and they want to kind of like veer really down that road. But because things aren't so developed at the moment, there is cracks and there is issues. So as technology irons itself out, and I think as we see a little bit more stability in the market, and that only comes through time, we could see a combination of both. Or the other alternative is the traditional finance companies actually moving a decentralized approach too. So we see the likes of large investment firms coming out with their own digital assets. They come out with their own stable coins at the moment, and they're also building out these large teams. So I think it's a two-way system overall, to be honest.
Yeah, that's probably a good way of looking at it. There's probably people that fall for the cracks of the traditional finance system now. They've got a DeFi option there, and I think that's a really good thing to have.
But as well, what you got to think about as well is like there's a lot involved with, let's say, setting up a mortgage, with doing like a lot of credit, giving credit out to people. It's not as simple as just like you want 10,000 or you want 20,000. There is a bit of due diligence in behind. If we can build out automated systems that risk profile people so that they can go take out these loans, fantastic. But until those risk models are particularly precise, we still need a certain element. So that's why over time, I believe that like you'll get a very good model built out. But when I say as well, traditional finance, it may not necessarily have to be like your brick and mortar, old balls bank down the corner. It really could be like a lightweight fintech startup as well, because what they've been able to do and what's so awesome about fintech, and which is why I'm so interested in this area, is because they just solve straight up problems.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter like what the issue is. It just problem, look for a solution and just fire it out. So the perfect example is remittance. And remittance is a monumental issue for underdeveloped countries. We often see huge fees being really hit on the individual, and fintech were able to provide that. Now, also in a decentralized approach as well, you may be able to do that. So you look at El Salvador building out like a Bitcoin city at the moment. That's fantastic. That's great. But you also have other companies then in a centralized approach are just doing just the exact same, zero fees, instant payment, and pretty much as good of a model being built.
Awesome stuff. And I'm sure we'll cover this further in the podcast, but really today, Darren, we're going to cover what I'm passionate about and you're passionate about is the metaverse. And from a fintech point of view, how is the metaverse perceived?
I think that's a really good question because like obviously financial technology is all about like the payments processing that's happening in the background, and there's a lot of movement towards the tech, like what are you going to see? Are people going to walk around and be able to interact with people? But how are we going to transact? So there's two elements I've kind of seen. You see a fully decentralized approach where people may be using, building off Ethereum, building payments that they can actually transact with. Or you have this centralized approach whereby we'll have the likes of Facebook, which I really think, or now Meta, is going to be the backbone to a lot of this stuff. If they were to come out with their own version of payments infrastructure, we could see a really, really good lightweight model being built. But ultimately, what we need in a nutshell is being able to transact in a safe and secure manner with no manipulation, essentially, and with essentially the ability to do it instantly. So I think a lot of fintech firms or a lot of crypto kind of startups would be looking at this as well from that perspective, because the companies that are there at the moment that are providing this, they aren't necessarily built for all of the functionality. And that's what's really, really cool, is because like they may not serve all the different elements of it. And only with time we have different kind of competitors come in and try to build out that infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely. And digital assets in the form of NFTs a good investment?
To understand firstly, about NFTs from an investment perspective, I think you need to take a step back. You need to walk a little bit back further. And I was thinking about this quite a lot. And it's like NFT is obviously a segment of the entire crypto market. You need to look at like the value of crypto at the moment and where we currently are. So if you look at the use case of NFTs, obviously we're creating this digital asset that people can own and transact. It's a sense of identity online, feeds into the metaverse as well. But really from a value perspective, you got to look at where crypto is at the moment. We're obviously going through a very big bull run at the moment where people are saying we're near the top. People are saying we're fast approaching the top. And because of that, you have all elements of fear, greed, essentially people wanting to be involved at the time of it being most trending. And when things are trending, prices are inflated. And even from a regular market perspective, at that stage, you see prices going crazy. If this is just regular equities, when you're looking at crypto markets, that's when things go absolutely parabolic. We have instances of prices going nuts and really crazy. And that's fed into this NFT model at the moment. So prices are all-time high. We see digital land being sold for 2-3 million. We're seeing like people like Snoop Dogg and stuff buying up NFTs at the moment. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're buying it for 1 or 2 million, fantastic. But the issue will come is when the ass falls out of the market.
Yeah.
If and when that comes, then the value of all of these will rapidly depreciate. And if you're ever looking at like altcoins, small cap altcoins in particular, like when Bitcoin falls 40%, these fall 80%. And one of my best mates said to me recently, he was saying from there, they'll also fall 90%. And from that price point, they'll fall 90% too. So, before you buy an ape for 4 or 5 Ethereum or ETH, you need to think about like how that will be influenced by price action elsewhere.
Yeah.
And that's what creates a bit of a kind of cosmic dynamic. However, over the course of the long run, as the development of NFTs get more, get more advanced, in particular, how do we use them? So how do we use these digital assets? That's when it becomes a good investment. So you never know like where the market's kind of going, but I do believe that owning things in a digital sense is 100% the way it's going to be going, because we have this sense of digital identity, this tribalistic approach that we're always trying to come in contact with, and being able to own things in a digital world does create a good investment approach. It's just about timing, it's just about valuation, and it's just about the true value of the asset that you're buying.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you're buying the original Fire Girl meme that's going to pay you off, going to pay your mortgage, but certainly you buy some really cool art or some original stuff. I mean, I know that Quentin Tarantino, for example, was planning to sell an NFT forms, some uncut scenes from Pulp Fiction, for example, like the other week, and things like that. I think that should be really a valuable that's where the value is. I mean, I know even on EA games, they actually are selling football teams and football players on FIFA as NFTs.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's just...
And what's awesome as well is like, okay, fair enough that a lot of those kind of like movie classics or whatever, if you're buying something that's really inflated right now and the ass falls out the market, fair enough, it might depreciate 60%. But if it is something like that that's quite unique, well, in over the long run, that'll be a winner.
Yeah.
And it may not be, we could be at the end of a bull cycle, but maybe after the next bear market, we go into another cycle and that NFT then absolutely 10x's. So that's where it's hard to anticipate, but it's about, if you're looking at it from an investment strategy, like you're going to go through every single turmoil, emotion and pain if you don't come into this with the right approach. And I think that's where we're running into issues, and that's where people are really like losing a lot of cash because they're seeing things like this and they're like, oh, what, I'm going to get in on it. And then other factors, and that's why I tied it back to kind of crypto as a whole, because other factors will always influence overall price.
Absolutely. And it's also come down to scarcity, and I think it's all about having something that's valuable. So is the Metaverse then all hype at the moment?
There's two ways to look at it. So just from the actual tech perspective, I actually don't think it is. I genuinely think where we're going, it's going to be like the next wave of the internet. And I think it's going to be really well built out. Not tomorrow, not next year. It's going to be a long ass play. It's going to be 2-5 years, whatever. But the reason why I think when Facebook first announced that they're going to rebrand and moved into it, that was when the first thing for me was like a kind of eureka moment that, okay, this shit is actually serious. Then I took a step back, looked at it from any sort of social media perspective. We're always looking for community, as I said. We're always looking for a level of uniqueness and to be part of a tribe. And what a metaverse allows you to do is step into that reality and actually scale up a lot of these things that we're always looking for. Because, what Instagram done so well was the fact that it lets you be with your mates when you weren't actually with your mates, and let you keep up with people when you didn't need to. So when you're looking at this from that perspective, it has enormous opportunity because people have an enhanced experience. And one of the criticisms of social media is the fact that you're close to it, but you're not necessarily in it. You know? And I think even for myself, like a 25-year-old dude, I was really there at the very start of when Facebook was really growing. Like I was 17, 18, and I remember everyone getting really obsessed with it, getting really like engrossed in it. And what was happening was you could really see how people were developing that kind of digital identity, and it would stop at that stage. Whereas now we have people that will be able to reconnect with people, be able to actually interact with people, and there's going to be so many different spin-offs from it. So if it's just a social media aspect, all right, fair enough. But what about the opportunities of going out and checking out your new home, going to Metaverse to research a home, driving a car before you go to actually buy it physically or whatever. So it gives us that new element. And like, if you ever look at like the historics of like the internet, like at first it seems like, why on earth would you share things online on Facebook? Well, when Facebook started, it was a check-in app. So people would check in saying, me and you are in Perth and we're having a cup of coffee. And now look how that's evolved.
Yes. Yeah.
So it will have the leaders building this out. You'll have Facebook, I think, building this out. You'll have Microsoft and even Apple, I think. But then there'll be much more things that we haven't even anticipated that is going to come down the path. And that's what social media is that it takes its own legs and it goes and grows organically.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way I see it too, I know the next question is about the multiple realities, but I think it's got so much application. I know, for example, here in Australia, there's a surgeon over here who's actually using hologram technology to enhance and help him operate on the surgery by having a joint in front of him on goggles, and he knows where to pinpoint, and the AI kicks in. I think that's what people are anticipating, is that it's going to jump off our screens. It's going to be like, if you look at Star Wars, there's going to be that Obi-Wan Kenobi moment when you're going to have that little hologram on the desk. I think in 10 years' time, me and you will be sitting here and we'll look like you'll be in Dublin, I'm in Perth, but look like we're face-to-face on a desk. I think that added dimensions is coming really fast, and I think that's going to catch a lot of people out, because I think the problem right now is that we're looking at the metaverse, which is Web 3.0, through the goggles of Web 2.0, because we just don't understand the full capability of it yet. Yeah.
But what's cool as well is the fact that, like, as you said, we don't anticipate it. So from that kind of hologram like perspective, like as in we could be doing a podcast technically in there.
Yeah.
And, you know, we could have people as a live audience and everyone can interact. So this is actually a concept that I was thinking of as well. That would be like essentially like an insane experience. Like that would like imagine how much friction there is in the world of podcasting at the moment. You need to open up Apple app, you need to download it. It's, you know, it's really shit friction at the moment. Whereas imagine if we could all step in and just like, you know, pre-record it or live, you go in and you see that experience. So that's what's really interesting. And I think you're going to have to be, like, I was trying to be an early mover on this in terms of like psychologically. So I'm not building a startup that's trying to solve it, but I'm saying that I want to be a first mover in the space to keep up with the trend. So there's, you know, enormous companies that are doing crazy things with this at the moment. And it's about not shying away from it, saying that it's just, you know, another bullshit phase. And it will go through the Gartner hype cycle if someone's familiar with it. So, you know, we have the initial growth stage where everyone thinks it's fantastic. Then there's like a dip, like a peak of disillusionment, and then we'll see the benefits.
Yeah.
So that's why I said 2 to 5 years, because it's people that are accumulating now and the people that are getting interested in it that will realize the benefit, but it's not going to be anytime soon, you know. And we don't know how to anticipate. We don't know how the rollout will go. Like even if it's Facebook, you know, Facebook roll out a feature to only 10,000 customers at a time, and it's bullshit as it is. Imagine rolling out something like this. It will take years, and it's a cultural thing. It's a psychological thing. I think younger generations are going to be the first people to lead it. They are living in a Fortnite world, 14, 15, 16-year-olds. They're always on IM. They're always on WhatsApp. They're doing their homework online. They're doing everything online. They're going to be the people that are going to lead this generational shift. And with true gaming and social media are the two top winners, I think, initially.
On a previous episode of how even luxury brands are entering Roblox, for example, like Gucci. So you can buy like a Gucci shoes or Gucci handbags for the avatar. And I think that's...
Of course. And the biggest thing on that, so like I'm really into the luxury brands aspect of the metaverse. I think that's where like a huge element's going to come through. So during COVID, for anyone that doesn't know, so people that were into fashion were doing a lot of online events because they wanted runways and stuff, which led the way to kind of this metaverse thinking. It was like, what if you could go and try on all these different brands? Whereas now we have people that are designers. There's a lot of French designers that I'm trying to get on my own podcast who have designed clothes, shoes, dresses, and then digitalized them and put them online. And people are literally buying them. And again, where I said we have the interaction, but the integration between multiple platforms is when you can go wear that avatar going around different games and whatnot. And that's what's really valuable. But it's going to be things like this that are already creative and eccentric. And then that's what pulls it across. And you'd have everyone that says, oh, you know, fuck that, I'm not buying something in the real world and digital world. And fair enough, you might. But how many people buy Gucci handbags in the first place?
That's right.
Fuck all people. So the people that want to buy them in a digital world have the capacity to do it. And that's where there's a market. You know, Gucci didn't make handbags for the average person. They made it for people with a net worth of greater than 100K.
Yep.
On average. And then as a result, it still appeals to that audience, but it's in a different way. So it's just how you frame things. It's like with a lot of things in life. You can sit there and be reactive or proactive and say, all right, I'm in, let's go for it, you know?
And Darren, as a fellow podcaster and covering tech much as I do, what's some of the most amazing blockchain projects you've seen that we haven't covered so far that my audience should be made aware of?
There's a few. I was putting them together earlier. So I think the main one, is really around that luxury brands that I was just speaking about. So I think that space of being able to go in and interact with people and sell these products online is going to be massive. So it's that integration that I was speaking about. So how do people take them and go and show them off? Now, there's a lot of luxury brands that are looking at building out. There's a startup in Germany, I forget the name of it. They're looking at building out like a collection store. So instead of buying clothes in a physical environment and then being able to try them on at home, you would essentially do this in a digital space, and I could go view your collection, you could go view my collection, and we could essentially trade over online. There's a huge opportunities here from a marketplace perspective, because what if you want to start up your own secondhand or freelancing business of clothing, and you've designed them and you've been able to sell them online. So I think that's awesome, but we need to see a use case where they become valuable. Back to the NFT point, unless you can use it, unless it's somewhat tangible, that's when we go into a lot of question marks. But you go back to the question about what is tangible. Is tangible something that you feel, or is tangible something that you experience and something that you hold and own? And if it is in that space, you could make something tangible by having it online and storing it in a store and whatnot. So I think that's what's going to be a really, really interesting development over the next 2-3 years.
Yeah, and actually I'm going to cover this a bit later, and people haven't really thought about it. It's actual haptic technology.
Yeah,
And,
for sure, man.
And that's really going to spin people out. What a conception of reality. You can have the gloves on and you can actually not only just buy these digital assets, you actually can feel like you're actually touching it. Wow. What would be a crazy world then after that? It's just that idea is just really, from an epistemological point of view, is just going to blow my mind of what is reality and what is your truth when we can recreate all of our senses online.
Of course.
Yeah. All we need now is someone to invent smell-o-vision and put me in the
that's the last element of the senses. Because it touches on all the senses, doesn't it?
Yeah,
and that's
it does.
What's so interesting.
Yeah, that's really, really fascinating. And speaking of which, because this podcast is about the future, Darren, how do you see the world in, say, 2032, particularly from a fintech point of view?
So obviously working in fintech space, I'm extremely bullish on the fintech environment. So we've seen a lot of investment come in over the last couple of months. A lot of VC interest has come into space and they're building out huge projects. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a global project, but there's been a lot of these startups that are coming to solve real problems, bringing it back to the original point. And I think what's going to be awesome is the fact that as these projects roll out, we're going to see more investment come into space. I think we're going to see really that unhinging of traditional finance. Now we may well have, you still have your traditional brokers and whatnot, your traditional banks that offer mortgages, but there's going to be more and more emphasis paid on this. You're going to have zero fees. You're really going to have all free FX. It's all going to be available. And then you're going to have that interoperability between different platforms. So a lot of startups in Asia, or not even startups, like you have the likes of Grab, Tokopedia. These are all like Southeast Asia based companies. They're doing e-commerce online at the moment, building their own payment infrastructure. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that coming down the road, even if it is the likes of Amazon coming out with their own payment infrastructure. And what it does is it creates this kind of super app approach whereby we'll have multiple players that will serve you in different ways. So you, Dave, will want to go down to the shop and pay for your regular daily expenses, but then you can go online as well and also be able to pay for whatever you need. You can cover your insurance. You can cover everything under one app. And I think that's where the world of finance is going. Wow. That can be centralized. That can be decentralized. Whatever way you want to cut your cloth. But I think that's the way things are going to go for the next 5-10 years.
Wow, that's going to be really, really exciting stuff ahead. And what else is driving your curiosity right now, Darren?
I think kind of back to kind of crypto at the moment is like what's really interesting is we have had a scenario whereby we've had 2 or 3 crashes over the last 5-6 years. And what that's kind of seen to me is that we are now looking at an instance whereby crypto is just not going away. And we know now that it's not going to zero. And back in the day, people say, it's going to zero, going to zero, going to zero. The more you learn and the more retail investors are learning about crypto, the more we all understand that this is not going away. Because of that, we've seen institutional investors getting more involved. We've seen them accumulate at low price points, which has been huge. It's caused a surge in price. We've seen Bitcoin up around 70K, Ethereum up around over 4,000 USD recently. And I think that's what's cool is because it's now become integrated into the financial system. And even if crashes come, even if there's pullbacks in the markets and stuff, I think what's cool is the fact that now we're all realizing that in the long term, we have these new projects that are going to be always in existence. Now, you do have the startups that come up and they're going to, fail and crash and burn, of course, but that's the same Silicon Valley, London, Shanghai, Singapore. It's the same everywhere. That's just the reality of the internet. But that's a big realization for me is the fact that, look, even if we do see a violent pullback of 50, 60% or 70 or 80%, this isn't going away. And there's going to be multiple different bull and bear markets over the next couple of years. And I'm excited to see where that kind of goes. And I think for a lot of people, there's good opportunity as well, especially younger people, to get involved with this stuff.
Absolutely. And is there anything I didn't ask but should?
That's kind of it, I think.
Yep.
We've went through all different elements so far.
Yep. And is there anything you'd like to ask me?
Probably about what's your thoughts on it? Where do you see a lot of these different, the Metaverse going at the moment? Do you think it's going to be a black period where nothing happens? Or do you think there's going to be a bit of a future in there?
Well, my thoughts are that the Metaverse kind of exists right now, but a really, really primitive level in the Metaverse, in the gaming world. But I think it will blow up, and I think it will just change the whole way we're going to approach the internet. I think, even your smartphone might be obsolete in 10 years. I also, on blockchain, I think something I'm kind of curious, and there are some projects I'm unearthing right now, is blockchain will not just disrupt the finance industry, it might disrupt the way we govern. I think the whole idea of even having a blockchain, say, digital nation, like kind of like the Estonian model where you have the e-resident and you can then get access to the EU. I think we might have a sort of like a digital nation. I think that if someone can get that sort of concept up and running, I think that might be the next big thing for blockchain.
Agree, man. I agree. I think that's it's a good prediction.
Absolutely. And finally, Darren, thanks for your chat today. Where else can we find you?
Yeah, sure. So you can find my podcast, Kickoff Sessions, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Post weekly sessions all around careers, tech for young people. And then also myself, LinkedIn, post on LinkedIn every single day. Find me on LinkedIn under Darren Lee, and you can also follow Kickoff Sessions HQ on Instagram.
No worries, Darren. It's been a pleasure chatting to you this afternoon, and we'll probably check up with you in probably 6 to 12 months to see how the world of fintech's going in your rides.
Of course.
Thanks very much. Thanks once again to Darren for his input. I'm sure you learned a lot today of what he had to say. Now stay tuned on Sunday the 26th of December in the civilised world, and it's also known as Boxing Day. We'll have a Boxing Day special. You see, one of the big hot ticket items this year is actually a fitness tracker. And what fitness tracker is a part of? It's part of Internet of Things. So I'm going to chat to Sean Duca, and we're going to have a chat about the cybersecurity risk for Internet of Things devices, which I think you should really pay attention to, especially the day after Christmas, because the last thing you want to do is have a brand new toy and all of a sudden your details are sold to some nefarious actor overseas. So listen out for that, a Boxing Day special coming out on Sunday, December 26th. The Friendly Futurist is a Podcast West production. It's produced by me, Dave Monk, edited by Alvin Lasuna. If you love the show, find us wherever you find a good podcast: Spotify, Deezer, Amazon Music, Apple. Once you're there, please like, follow, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. That way it can help us be more discoverable and spread the word. And if you really love the show, you can donate via Buy Me a Coffee, details in the show notes, and also have a read out for my monthly newsletter, which comes out about things I learned this month. Details in the show notes. Until next time, friends, remember to stay curious, and the future is user-friendly.
Another Podcasts West production.